Two white homes surrounded by African American, Latino people, and everything's comfortable. We all get along. And I come to this coffee house, and I'm pretty sure there's no racism here. It's a wonderful spot for that reason. But that's not where I grew up. I grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Wilmette. And somewhere along the line I realized not one person there not white. And you don't think about it a lot as a kid. You just take life as it comes. But somewhere I started becoming curious. Well, African Americans, well, we didn't call them that. We called them colored people. We called them Negroes. And I didn't know anything about them. They were people I saw playing baseball, and when I saw the Cubs or something, or saw them in the newspaper, radio, or something. You know, they weren't people I knew. They're just people. They were out there. They're part of America. Sometimes we'd drive through Evanston. We'd drive through a neighborhood. We didn't call it the Negro neighborhood. We didn't call it the colored people neighborhood. We called it the poor neighborhood, although both were true. But these were people I didn't know, and somewhere along the line I started realizing some people didn't like them. Kids at the playground, kids at school would say things about them, you know, that could be said. And my father, at some point, I realized, he basically said they're no good, they're dumb, they're useless, they're prison bait and everything like that. And I didn't buy into this, but I didn't know a reason for not believing it. You know, it's like, it doesn't seem right, but I didn't have any proof. And it could have maybe gone the way Dad wanted us to go, who knows. But I remember one day we were getting gas at a station, and in those days you had somebody would fill it for you. And this older black man came out, and he wasn't well dressed, and he said something, you know, getting the gas, like, well, you $4.35, you know, he very slurred his words, they hardly came out. And as he walked away, Dad said, dumb nigger. And Mom just turned around to the kids in the back seat and said, he's not dumb, he was just never able to get a good education. And suddenly it was all clear to me. People who don't get a good education may not talk well. They might talk like they're uneducated. They might be poor. And the whole thing was very clear as light. And from then on, I was never a racist. And Dad tried again. He wanted to take us to the slums of Chicago. And he wanted us to show us how they lived, how they, you know, these inferior people lived. But Mom trumped him again, because just before we got to this, you know, toward the slums, Mom just turned around to the kids and said, just because we have more money doesn't mean we're better. And with that, Dad's whole thing didn't work. Didn't work. So I never became a racist like my father might have, but I never talked to anybody who was African American, or as we said then, Negro color. The first African American I met was sitting on an airplane. I walked by him, noticed him, and went on and sat to my seat. And I sat down and said to myself, well, I could just go talk to him. And I go, nah, he probably doesn't want to talk to me. I said, well, you know, I could talk to him. Well, what if he doesn't want to talk to me? Won't that be embarrassing? And finally, I just got up and did it. I walked up to the front of the plane, walked up, he was in front of me, turned to the left, looked at him and said, excuse me, sir, are you Martin Luther King? And he looked up at me and said, why, yes I am. That's the next words that still, I just can't believe ever happened to me, and still, you know, such a joyful thing. He just said, would you like a seat? So I passed by him with the knees, and I said, he's the most famous man in the world. He's the most famous man in the world. What do I say to him? What do I say? And I sat down, and I'm still wondering what we're going to say, and finally he just turns to me and says, so where are you going? I said, oh, my friend Peter, he went to college out east, and I didn't, so he invited me out to a party in Washington. And soon we're talking about parties, and we're talking about Washington, and we're talking about airports and airplanes. We're having a nice old conversation. He's a real good guy, actually. You know, if we were just Martin King and nobody famous, and, you know, you always hear in speeches, but just a person to talk to, wonderful guy. But somewhere else, and I realized, oh my God, no, he's Martin Luther King. I have to say to him, you know, something. And I had read in the newspaper that he was coming to Chicago to demonstrate. And I said to him, Dr. King, why are you coming to Chicago to demonstrate? We don't make people ride in the back of buses we don't make them go to segregated schools. And he said, yeah. He says, what part of Chicago do you live in? And I said, I live in Wilmette. He said, any black folk live there? I said, well, I know. He said, why do you suppose that is in the books? And I started to say, well, they live in the black part of town. I didn't say it because just thinking about, there's a black part of town, there's a white part of town, I just didn't like that. And then I started to go, well, they could never, and I just kind of went, and I was going to say they could never afford to live there. True, but a nasty truth. I just stopped. And then I just said, I don't know. He never answered my question exactly. He just said, when you find the answer to that question, you'll find it's very interesting. And when he said that, another gentleman came over, his assistant or something like that, and said, Dr. King's very tired, needs to sleep. Or rest or something. And anyway, so Dr. King just said, well, if you want to do something, if you want to join us in our demonstrations, call this man. And he wrote down on a blank match cover, Rev. Jesse Jackson, 3-something, call this guy. Okay. I went to Washington, D.C. Kind of a weird day because later on I met there, right off the plane I meet Lucy Baines Johnson, President Johnson's 18-year-old daughter. So it's kind of a weird day, but another story. Went back home and started asking questions of why we're so totally white in Wilmette. And what I found out is the realtors really don't want to take care of an African American who wants to buy a home there. They basically will say, we're shut. Going home, the price is $100,000 higher than it was yesterday or something. They get rid of the guy if they can. If they can't, there's two other things that always work. So people would have in their homes, we are not going to, something like we do not wish it sold to an African American. They didn't say that, it was Negro, right? And that was legal then. And the other thing was what's called redlining. If you came from a certain neighborhood, the banks would not give you a loan. Since the African Americans could only live in certain neighborhoods, they all came from the neighborhoods that were red lines. They never got a loan. Anyway, it wasn't just that there was the white neighborhood and there was the black neighborhood. It wasn't just that they probably couldn't afford it. It was a lot more deliberate and controlled, and I had never realized it. And with that, I decided to go to the demonstration. But I couldn't quite make the first one. And I was a little scared. My brother went to it. And he came back and said, I said, what was it like? He said, it was okay. That's all he said. Actually, it was kind of not okay. It was very violent. The cars of the people who were demonstrating were attacked by people with baseball bats and they had all their windows broken into. And my brother said, it was okay. But anyway, I said, my brother can do it, I can do it. So I had someone drive me to the demonstration. I called Jesse Jackson. He answered. He told me where to go. And I showed up, and there, this scene, it was just, I didn't know what to expect, but it was more than I was expecting. There was more people than I thought would be there, and they were angrier, more hostile, even though I'd read about smashing the cars with baseball bats. And there was about 80 to 100 demonstrators inside, surrounded by police, totally surrounded by police officers, basically standing, holding back the crowd. And about 2,000 people around them, I don't know exactly, all white. Angry, hostile, mad. I asked the police officer if they'd let me join the demonstrator. He kind of like, what do you want to do that for? And I just kind of said, I want to go in. So, okay, let me in. And I got in there and started realizing, oh, yeah, this is not really, it's really heavy-duty kind of thing. Somewhere along the line, they started throwing rocks and bottles at us. Bags with shit in them. And they're just hostile. They're just hostile. And they took a special interest in us white people. They started people would call, hey, you're a traitor to the white race. And it just kind of didn't resonate with me. I didn't feel like I was going against my race. I kind of felt if we all could live together, it'd be better for everyone. I didn't respond. I just, heard that. And then they started calling me a nigger lover. And again, it just didn't work. And if they were trying to hurt my feelings or something, because I felt, that's fine. I'm cool with that one. And then one point, some guy, he just started staring at me, this real hostile look. And I just kind of, okay, I'm going to go somewhere else, you know. I went somewhere else. And he follows me. He's behind the cops. And he's following me, and I go, I mean, went, you know, to where else I was. And he's still staring at me. And I go a third place, and he's still staring at me. And finally, I just kind of give him like, what's with you, man, you know. And he says, I'm memorizing your face. He says, because if I ever see you when the cops aren't around, I'm going to fucking kill you. I kind of just walked away going, okay, it's a very big city. It's a very big city. I never know where I live. It's a big city, Chicago. And I was kind of shaken up then. So. It was very difficult. People started pushing and pushing and pushing, and finally the cops had to take out their clubs. And finally they had to use their clubs. If you've ever heard the sound of a club hitting a head, oh, it's horrible. It just goes smack. And you'd think, okay, we're out of here, you know, think they'd all run up. No, they just kept on pushing on, and people, you know, one guy get bloody and then just keep on going. And it was just kind of like, what? You saw what he did to that guy, and they're going to club you. Yeah, bam! And they clubbed another guy, and they clubbed another guy. And they had to do it because basically, I mean, they were under orders not to let King, I mean, because, you know, it wasn't me they were protecting. They not had an incident where King was attacked or taken advantage of. And they clubbed those guys. And still, eventually, it kind of subdued them. But then we got to a point where we hadn't been able to sit down for 4 hours. We hadn't been able to eat for 4 or 5 hours. We hadn't been able to pee for 4 or 5 hours. And somebody finally told Dr. King, you know, we can't do this anymore. And he suddenly realized, okay, yeah, okay. So he said, we'll all meet back at the church of whatever it was that Jesse Jackson was reverend. I don't know how we got there safe there. I really don't remember. I know riding in a car with some guys, and we got there, and we were there. And everybody was just really like, this is the worst. This is the worst. We'd been, you know, people had gotten hit by the rock and bottles. Myself never, but people gotten hurt. We worn ourselves out. For them, it was the second day of this. Like, this is never going to succeed. This is never going to work. Nobody cares. And I think they were just going to give up. And then Dr. King spoke. And I can't remember what he said. All I remember is by the time he was done, everybody knew we were going to win this. We would overcome. It would work. This is going to be successful. And we just believed him. And he just talked us that way. He had that thing of turning us around. Yes, we're going to succeed. This is a setback. This will be it. He finished. We sang, "We Shall Overcome." Perhaps one of the most beautiful moments of my life. I just can't tell you how much. It goose pimples and everything. Beautiful moment. We did lose him, of course. And he thought he left Chicago. Basically, they're saying that Mayor Daley won, and the white people won, and he won. But you go back there today. You go to my hometown. There's African Americans there. It's illegal to discriminate against housing. There's a long way to go on racism, but I'm glad I had my own part, and glad I can tell you the story.